Sucker Punch is a studio that has always stood for high quality for the PlayStation consoles. They established themselves with this quality during the PS2 era. That generation was full of colorful action platformers from the Jak games to the Ratchet & Clank series. Sucker Punch rounded out this bunch with their trilogy of Sly Cooper games. These were enjoyable platformers with likable characters, good gameplay, and stylish visuals. As Sucker Punch transitioned into the PS3 generation, they left their Sly Cooper series behind to create something new and different for the studio. They wanted to make an open-world game that focused on third-person combat, superpowers, and cutscenes with a comic book style. In 2009, they provided us with the very memorable Infamous. This is personally my favorite title from the studio. It was a superhero origin story, and they had a dense and fun open world with fantastic combat. 2 years later, they gave us a solid sequel, and in 2014, they launched a third Infamous game on the PS4. The studio went dark for a long time after this. They reappeared with trailers for their new game, which was going to focus on feudal Japan. Ghost of Tsushima is easily my favorite title of theirs since the first Infamous, and it's a fantastic swan song to the PS4 generation. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my review for Ghost of Tsushima. When it comes to the combat, it is both satisfying and it never becomes old. Combat is split into two parts, open sword fights and stealth. While in open combat, you will have several options at your disposal. The light slash is useful for quick hits to the enemies, and the heavy slash helps to break down the enemy defenses, leaving them open to your light slashes. For defense, you can block incoming attacks with your sword, and if you get the timing right, you can parry an attack and use that as an opportunity to hit them with a counter attack. The same can be done with a well-timed dodge. You can change different sword stances on the fly for different enemy types. For example, certain stances are better against shielded enemies over other stances. You earn up to 4 different stances throughout the campaign. You also have a good amount of gadgets to use to help you out. You can throw knives, which will break enemy defenses, and in some cases outright kill many enemies. Sticky bombs are great as well, as they can leave your enemies vulnerable to your sword. Smoke bombs give you back some health along with giving you some breathing room. Then you have your bow and arrows for ranged attacks. These come with their own special equipment like fire arrows and explosive arrows. If you need to heal, you can use some of the energy that you earn from hitting enemies to heal yourself, or use sword techniques to thin the herd. And on top of all of this, you have an overcharge meter that you earn in the second act. If you can kill a few enemies without being hit, you will be able to use your overcharge move, which turns the game into a black and white image and allows you to instantly kill 3 enemies. The open combat gives you a lot of options, to the point that your form of expression through these encounters might differ from another player. I favored using the gadgets more in my playthrough, while a friend of mine focused on changing stances to defeat enemies. The options are appreciated because it helps to keep the combat fresh while allowing you to put your own personalization onto it. Like I said, slashing with your sword never gets old. The fights result in some satisfying blood and some dismemberment depending on the moves. This may sound a bit sick, but I want them to jack up the dismemberment for the sequel. I never got tired of the swordplay, and I always wanted more of it. While the large amount of combat options keeps the combat fresh, the enemy variety helps with this as well. You have your weaker bandits, shield enemies, large foes, archers, pikemen, and more. Each of the different enemies requires you to pay attention to different things. Archers are easy to take out, but they can eat away at your health if you don't focus on them. The larger foes can knock you around and charge at you. When you first go to an enemy location, you can challenge them up front to a standoff. Here you need to get your timing right to quickly kill a few enemies. There will be many instances where you can choose to use stealth to complete your objectives. You have your stealth takedowns and your bow to help you, along with being able to chain a few stealth takedowns in a row. My favorite of the takedowns is when you can kill someone through a door. Stealth never feels like the main option in this game, but rather a satisfying side option that will likely lead into an open encounter. The stealth is simple and what you would expect from many modern titles. There are a good handful of sequences where you will engage in one-on-one duels. These sort of act like boss fight encounters. The focus is on the swordplay here. Each of the fights have great build up to them with a lot of visual style, but the fights themselves can feel kinda samey. The open world is set up like a checklist open world game while doing a great job at hiding this. For example, there are many spots and activities to do, but the game does not populate your map with those icons. You first need to explore the area to find these points of interest. In this way, it feels more like you are stumbling upon these activities rather than just checking boxes off a list. Some activities, when completed, will remove some of the fog on the map and alert you to some points of interest that are close by. While riding around the open world, you will see a yellow bird that will point you in the direction of something useful, or a fox that will lead you to a shrine. The direction of the wind is used to show you towards your next objective, and all of this is done to avoid clutter on your HUD so you can take in the beautiful environments. You will encounter random Mongols to fight in the open world and can learn points of interest from the people that you save. This stuff makes the exploration feel more natural, along with cementing the Mongols as a large threat and how you are chipping away at them. Along with this, the game isn't afraid to have gamey elements that remove realism from the gameplay and focus more on quality of life improvements. While on horseback, you can grab items that are on the ground or around you, so you don't need to get off your horse to grab them. You can swim with your armor on, and you will jump like you are not wearing any armor. The side stuff is a nice mix of attacking bases, finding items to improve your stats, and some platforming challenges. Attacking bases nets you with nice rewards and offers a good amount of variability on how you complete them. You will find spas that will improve your maximum health, along with allowing Jin to reflect on different elements of the story. There are these shrines that require you to do some platforming, and they get more engaging as you continue in the game. The jumping feels good, and it gets better when you get your grappling hook, which allows you to climb higher and swing. As you complete enemy encounters and missions, you will gain experience points, and you can use that to open up more moves for you to use. You can use materials to upgrade your equipment, along with improving your armor. Each of the different armor sets that you unlock will provide you with different buffs, like more health and better stealth. In addition to the open world activities, there are side missions to complete. There are a lot of these one-off missions that will have their own mini story to them. These are generally pretty good, with some highlights. A lot of them help to give you perspective of the people that you are trying to save and how the Mongols are affecting their way of life. Then you have a few side quest strings that are a set of missions that tie into a larger story. These are more on par with the main missions. These missions are some of the best side content in the game. My favorite of these is one that features an older samurai who is hunting down his apprentice. The combat is solid on its own, with lots of options and satisfaction in your hits. The open world is both beautiful and engaging with its approach to the side content, and side missions are worth completing as well. And on top of all of this, you are always earning new gadgets, moves, and different pieces of equipment. The gameplay is very compelling and rewarding, and I loved every moment of it.
The Mongol Empire is invading our home. They are brutal, relentless, unstoppable. We are 80 samurai against an army.
This section will not have any spoilers in it, and I will pop up a warning when I get into spoilers. The game has an effective introduction. It quickly establishes our enemies and cements them as a large threat. The game has one of the best introductions in a while, as it effectively pulls you into the story with providing you quality gameplay. Within the early minutes of the game, we feel that weight of the threat, along with how the samurai fight with a certain code. The Mongols do not respect the code, and in some ways use that as a way to defeat the samurai. These bits are a nice foreshadowing to how Jin must become something else to defeat his enemies. Jin loses almost everything and must work his way to gather allies to defeat his enemies. Jin is a pretty good main character. His most compelling aspect is his internal conflict of wanting to honor his samurai path and then adapting to defeat the Mongolians. Early on, we get flashbacks that show Jin's training as a samurai and how he works to uphold that honor of the samurai along with his family. As he explores fighting in a more ninja-like fashion, he struggles with his honor and the code that he belongs to. One nice aspect of the game is that as you use some of the skills that a ninja would use, the gameplay will get interrupted by a flashback of Jin when he was younger, remembering what his uncle taught him. I really like these sequences as it further shows Jin's struggle. The main villain isn't the most in-depth, but he does have some nice moments throughout the story that present him as a good threat. Overall, I really enjoyed the story. Now I'm going to get into spoilers, so if you do not want the story spoiled for you, skip to this time on the video. I really like how the first act is focused on trying to build allies to rescue your uncle. This is where a lot of the mini-stories start. The siege to rescue your uncle is one of the early epic moments within the game. This is also where we see Jin get betrayed by his childhood friend. The game wanted this betrayal to land harder than it did for me. It was a nice twist to the situation, but I didn't have enough emotional buy-in for it to really land. I think if we got some flashbacks between the two of them, that would have helped. Jin and his friend really needed more time to develop their relationship before the betrayal happened. I was a little worried that Jin's uncle was going to die early on, but I was glad that he didn't die early on so that we could have that conflict with Jin. After you rescue his uncle, you will see how he disapproves of Jin's new ways that go against the samurai's path. His uncle tolerates Jin's methods until they try to take back his castle. Their forces fall into a trap, and Jin wants to end the conflict swiftly to save more of his people's lives. So Jin plans to poison the Mongols. Jin's uncle disapproves as this is a dishonorable way to defeat their enemies. I really like how Jin is willing to throw away his honor for the sake of saving more people. After Jin successfully poisons the Mongols, his uncle is displeased and says that there must be a consequence to his actions. Either Jin turns himself in or they turn in Yuna, his friend. Jin turns himself in, and with the help of another friend, he is able to escape. During the escape, Jin's horse is injured and eventually dies. I found this part was earned and it emotionally hit me. This is because at the beginning of the game, you get to choose your horse before you set out on your adventure, and your horse is with you for most of the game. This didn't feel like a cheap use of an animal death, but rather an earned one. One big thing that I enjoyed about the story and the structure was how there would be setup to the bigger battles. This way you felt like a few of the main quests were building up to these larger fights, and when those fights happened, they were appropriately epic. I also enjoyed the growth with Yuna's brother Taka. Jin recruits him to join his cause, and Taka is a blacksmith and he helps out Jin by making him better weapons. Taka is not a fighter, but as the story goes on, we slowly see him get inspired by Jin's actions to rise up. At one point, Taka tries to help Jin, but both of them get captured, and this results in Taka dying by the hand of the Khan. I felt like we have an emotional buy-in to hate the villain now with this sequence. Overall, I really enjoyed the story in this game. The inner conflict of Jin was really interesting. Some of the emotional moments did not land as hard as the game wanted to, but others landed just right. I did like how there was some consequence to Jin's actions, like how it created a divide between him and his uncle, along with the Mongols learning about the poison that he used on them, and then the Mongols using the poison against Jin's people. The structure of the story is familiar with some predictable parts, but that never took away from the enjoyment. It was a refreshingly good story. Overall, I love Ghost of Tsushima. I did identify a few flaws while playing it. I had a bunch of times where I had these odd graphical glitches. There would be these times where stuff on the screen would quickly flicker white. I had one instance where the voices did not sync up with the mouth movement. I had another instance where one side mission bugged out on me and would not let me examine certain spots, so I could not proceed. I quit back to the main menu and reloaded it, and it worked just fine after this. I wish that the one-on-one duels felt different and unique rather than like the same fight each time you encounter them. I do wish that the armor abilities were not tied to a specific piece of armor. This way I could wear what I wanted and then slot in the buffs that I wanted and not be restricted to wear specific armor sets because those give me the best boosts. I would want a similar system that we saw in the Spider-Man release on the PS4. Sometimes the game will stop the combat and force you to change stances, and this was annoying and unneeded. My biggest concern was generally how easy the game felt on hard. I felt like the power and the amount of gadgets that you had made some of the fights really easy to get through. The throwing daggers can hurt 3 people at once and can make much of the first area really easy. But one thing I appreciated was how each new area progressively got harder, so I hope that they can balance out these fun gadgets in the sequel and potentially have a harder difficulty to this game. Overall, I did not have any glaring flaws with this game. It was a great experience from start to finish. The load times were impressive and the soundtrack was just as wonderful as the visuals. Here are a few tracks from the game. Ghost of Tsushima is my favorite game from Sucker Punch since the first Infamous, and it's easily one of my favorite titles this generation. The story is solid with some compelling conflict on finding a new way to defeat the Mongols and wanting to honor the samurai code. Jin's struggle to help his people is a familiar yet memorable one. The game is packed with so many activities to do within the open world. From the open world activities to the side missions, this game provides a large amount of great content. The bigger battles have the right build-up and payoff to them. The combat provides many different options to the player that will give you a variety of tools to use to create your own personalized flow. The game is gorgeous from its visual and audio presentation. Ghost of Tsushima is an excellent swan song to the PS4, and I highly recommend it. Thank you very much for watching.